For today's FSI Spotlight, I had a fun yet informative conversation with Greg Palmer, VP at Finovate, the financial services or Fintech event series. Greg is not only the host for the event series, but also host of the Finovate podcast. In addition to that, director of Fintech strategy at Informa Connect, contributor at Fintech Futures. What's great about Greg is he's been in a role for Finovate for quite some time. The role has changed over time, but along the way, he's had some big aha moments. He's seen trends emerging, trends changing over time. So he told us a few stories about the history of Finovate, his history with Finovate, as well as the innovation trends that he sees coming very, very soon. So let's jump in. All right, Greg, okay. First and foremost, can you finally settle the argument? Should the T be capitalized in fintech or not?
No, absolutely not. And the F shouldn't be capitalized either. No capitals at all, lowercase all the way. If you capitalize even one letter in that question, you're a noob.
Have you ever capitalized any of those letters? I'm sure you have at one point.
Yeah, I mean, like a decade ago, right? Back when we were like literally contracting the words financial technology. Sure, you started,
Yeah.
And then I mean, by about 6 months in, I was like, this is unsustainable. So probably it's been maybe nine and a half years since I've capitalized either the F or the T.
Well, candidly, I'm doing it completely wrong. So thank you for that. I'm glad I asked you that question.
There we go. Useful information. Are we done here? I mean, what else is there to record? That's it, right? That's okay. Okay. See you later.
That's going to be my primary takeaway, and I just got it right out of the way. So tell us about who Greg Palmer is and exactly what you're doing for Finovate, and you might as well just take this as an opportunity to explain what Finovate is and why our FSI members should care. They probably already know, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people in financial technology know about Finovate, have maybe attended one or seen some of the videos that we've produced, but we are a financial technology showcase first and foremost. We're a place where people can come to demonstrate new innovative fintech solutions to an audience in a live demo way, which means no PowerPoint slides, no canned video. We put live technology up on stage and we give companies just 7 minutes to do it. So it's a great way for an audience member to come and see a number of different financial technology solutions in one day. From a fintech company standpoint, it's a great way to get your message out there to a group of people, to a group of influencers, bankers, venture capitalists, members of the media, and things like that. And then, of course, we have a lot of networking time available for people to connect and bounce off of each other. A huge amount of our success over the years has been basically just bringing a lot of really intelligent people into the same space, giving them a lot of caffeine, letting them kind of bounce off of each other. Obviously, of course, this assumes, we're in normal circumstances when we're able to hold in-person events, which we do, we will do again once we're able to. But, that's really what Finovate has been all about, this idea of no BS. Let's put the technology up on the screen. It either works or it doesn't. And if you can't say why it's important in 7 minutes, then you need to come back and try again, because that should be plenty of time for you to get your message out there and hit people in the audience in a way that lets them understand, do I need to learn more about this technology? And of course, the goal for all the presenting companies is to make sure the answer to that question is yes. I want to have that follow-up conversation. But outside of that, that's really what we're about. 3 basic elements of Finovate: see new technologies, hear new ideas from influential speakers, and connect with people who can help you take it to the next level. And we've been doing it since 2007.
Very cool, Greg. So you've been a VP, and you've also been at Finovate for 11 years, according to LinkedIn. Tell us a little bit about maybe how your role has changed over the years. Are you still doing the same thing today that you did 11 years ago?
Oh, man, not even close. So when I first joined Finovate, late in 2009, it was a really early stage company. We had the founder of the company, the CEO, and me. And for a while, it was just the 3 of us. We were putting these events together at a much smaller scale than we ended up doing later on. For a while, I was doing everything from making sure we had water delivered to the office, getting printers and things set up, doing a lot of the kind of checklists, making sure that the events ran smoothly. There's just a lot of logistical pieces that go into it. Over time, as Finovate grew, we were able to hire a number of other people. And so my role grew into something more strategic. And eventually I started hosting the conferences in about 2013. That was a really big difference in terms of my kind of day-to-day responsibilities at that point. I had less of the running around with the clipboard and checklist in that moment, and more of really learning about financial technology and speaking to people, speaking in front of people, hosting the events. And it's been a lot of fun just to get a sense of how this industry works, who the personalities are. And I've seen just a ton of demos in that capacity and have a pretty good idea of, what works, what resonates from that moment. And actually one of the most fun aspects of my job, which a lot of people don't know that I do, but I do demo coaching for all of the companies who come across our stage, giving them some ideas on how best to use the time that they have, how to structure their demos, how to think of their messages. And that's something which we spend a lot of time with the companies to make sure they're ready. We know we have a tricky format. We know that a live demo in 7 minutes is a tall order. And so we want to do as much as we can to make sure that we support the companies who do it. And that demo coaching piece is really fun for me. I get a chance to kind of know the companies a little bit before they get up on stage. I get to see the evolution of their initial ideas to what they end up performing up there in front of the audience. And it's something that I'm actually really passionate about, is helping companies get their messages across, getting them out there. And when it goes well, it's really fun.
And you have FinovateWest coming up in a couple of weeks. Tell us about that. I'm assuming it's not going to be in Las Vegas or some fun gathering like that.
No, so we traditionally do 2 US shows a year, one in San Francisco and one in New York. This will be a virtual event, which replaces our San Francisco event for 2020. Obviously, we're unable to do anything in person. So we're doing a digital event that's focusing on the West Coast of the US, although we will be pulling attendees from all around the US and indeed all over the world. So we just wrapped up Finovate Fall, which replaced our New York show. We did a digital version of that one. And now we're doing a digital version of FinovateWest, which should be really exciting. Obviously, it's not going to be quite the same as being able to be there in person in downtown San Francisco. But I think we'll be able to give people a really good understanding of where the industry is at right now. Let them hear from a couple of experts who can give them ideas to solve any of the myriad of challenges facing the financial industry at the moment. And of course, an emphasis on that live demo component. Although because we're doing it remotely, the demos will be slightly different format than they would at a traditional show. We've expanded from 7 minutes to 10 minutes, and we've allowed the companies to have more of an interview style. So I'll be involved with a lot of those demo videos as well, just asking some questions, kind of guiding the companies through some of the walkthroughs. So we've expanded the time to make sure that I don't eat up their demo time. So they've all got 10 minutes now instead of 7, but the same basic idea still applies. In a really short order, you can see a lot of demos really quickly.
So you have an amazing amount of visibility, I would imagine, compared to most folks in the industry. Tell us about any current trends you're seeing in financial technology, or maybe you could speak to innovation trends just within financial services as a whole. You're welcome to take that question any direction you like.
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of trends right now, there's obviously the big changes being driven by COVID-19. And it's really been a fascinating thing to watch from a financial technology standpoint. I'm not going to say it's fascinating from any other standpoints, right? There's any number of really negative pieces that come along with it. But if you can detach yourself from that side of it and think about it, in a purely analytical fintech type of capacity, what it has done has really forced a lot of banks overnight to make a leap that they were not comfortable making before, pushing things into a digital standpoint, whether that's account opening, customer service, or any number of other areas. All of a sudden, the branch was no longer an option for at least a little while in some cities. Now, in most places, you can go back into a branch, you can put on a mask, and you can wash your hands when you're done and feel reasonably secure about it. But that first couple of painful months back in the spring really forced banks overnight to say, we are not prepared for this. And there's this kind of reckoning moment where they realized how far behind a lot of them were on being able to truly offer digital solutions. And so, the big trend I think that's going on right now is companies and fintech companies and banks responding to that and thinking to themselves, okay, what do we need to do? How can we get ourselves in a position where if we aren't able to have people come in, we can still bring them or still service them in some way, bring them into our organization, open an account, get a loan, and things like that. And so much of the innovation that has gone on over the last year since COVID-19 really hit are really technologies that have been in existence for several years previously. But the big difference now is there's this motivation gap that got closed. So you see certain companies in the financial technology space who got flooded, crazy amount of interest to the point that they couldn't really keep up. They're hiring people like crazy. They're trying to bring companies on board as fast as they possibly can. And so those are companies who are already kind of in that moment to, or well set up to take advantage of that type of thing. On the flip side, you have companies who really weren't ready for it, who hadn't necessarily done as much of that, or maybe just through some bad luck, we're in a target area that all of a sudden wasn't as relevant, wasn't as big of a pain point as the banks were experiencing. And so what it's really done has kind of split the fintech ecosystem into one half that is really, really busy, kind of overflowing with work that really needs to be done and maybe arguably should have been done a year or two or five previously. And on the other side, you've got a group who all of a sudden has seen this ground shift underneath them and found out that the things that they were working on aren't as important as they used to be. And it's going to be interesting to see long term what happens to those two groups, because a lot of the challenges that people were working on in 2019 haven't gone away. They've just been replaced in terms of priority by this really big task of, oh my God, we need to get online. We need to make sure that people can actually open an account online, not fill out a couple of forms, and then say, okay, print this out and bring it into the branch and we'll finish your online account opening. Okay, that's obviously not really online account opening. So the prioritization has shifted, and it's really put a lot of pressure on a lot of different aspects of the financial technology ecosystem, and it's continuing to do that. So if you want to look at really big picture trends, customer onboarding, customer care, core banking, making sure that your bank is in a position to be able to incorporate some of those other pieces. These are all areas where we've seen a lot of people making movement. And then, of course, anytime you've got this kind of big groundswell, security is a massive concern. So many more people are banking online or doing more and more transactions online, and which just opens the door for fraudsters and illegitimate actors to come in. And so, anytime you get a massive leap forward, a massive shift in customer behavior or banking behavior, the security concern really becomes a big one as well. So that's right there with all the others, I would say.
So VP, 11 years, obviously you probably had some big aha moments over the years. You're probably much more attuned to the trends, as you just showed us right there. There were probably along the way some massive learnings. Can you think of any like aha moments from the beginning till now that where you just connected the dots, you just realized that maybe things weren't exactly the way you thought they were, et cetera?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a couple that sort of spring immediately to mind. And the first comes from, fairly early days of Finovate. When I first joined Finovate, I had no experience working for a bank. I'd never worked at a fintech company before. The closest I got was, prior to this, I was working in marketing for Washington Mutual back when there was a Washington Mutual here in Seattle. And but I didn't know a lot about the technology side of it. It was basically just trying to, bring customers into our funnel and get them to open up accounts. So when I started coming to Finovate, I learned pretty quickly that there was a whole new language in the financial technology space. And that was really intimidating, right? As an outsider coming into that space, I was looking at these demos and I was looking at the conversations that were going on and just thinking, man, I don't know. I'm the slow kid in school, right? I don't know what's going on. I've got to try and keep up. And for the first couple of years, I would be in the networking space. And my entire goal in that networking space was simply to not expose my ignorance, not to be outed as an imposter, as somebody who didn't belong in that room. And over time, as I started watching these demos and I started talking more to the companies and doing this coaching that I was talking about, I started to realize that a lot of the failure in my understanding of financial technology wasn't actually on my own part. It was a failure in terms of communication of the industry, making it in a language that I could understand. And when I started really looking at it through this lens, I realized, fintech innovators are great at spotting inefficiencies. They're great at coding and building products that people want, but they're not always good at explaining why their work matters to other people. And you see this in two key areas. fintech companies frequently have a hard time communicating with bankers. They don't always speak the same language. They don't always have the same goals or priorities. An example, a fintech company will stand up on stage and say, we're going to disrupt how this is done, and be really excited about saying that. And a company, a bank in the audience is going to say, oh my God, a disruption. That sounds terrible. I must avoid a disruption at all costs. And so you have this disconnect there. And then of course there's the end user, the person who actually we want to use the technology, who you can say in a fintech ecosystem, this tool will help you budget, it will help you get your credit where you need to go, it'll help you save up for your goals. And the end user ecosystem basically said, meh, we're not interested, like we don't care. And so I looked at it from that standpoint, thinking this is an industry that really has a tough time validating itself to external groups. And when I started to look at it through that lens, it was really interesting. And I started looking at the demos in particular and really pushing companies to kind of get out of the fintech jargon and think about things in much more plain English terms. And to the point that I'll be on phone calls talking to companies, and I would have to stop them in their demo and say, are you making a bank more money? And they would say, yeah. And I'm like, well, then you need to say that in your demo. You need to actually come out and say, we can improve your bottom line. Are you eliminating an inefficiency? Then you need to say that. You need to come back to this really high level. And so, hopefully in the work that I've done, you've seen, the way the Finovate demos have evolved, more and more companies are able to speak about it at that high level. But for me, that initial moment where I realized that actually it wasn't my own failing, that it was on the part of the industry, and the way they communicated was a watershed moment for me, and has really drastically changed how I view the industry and how I view my own role within that industry. The more I can help companies express themselves, get their messages out there, the happier I am. It's something I'm very passionate about, and it's still an area where I think fintech companies need a lot of help.
So you're actually our very first English major on the
Yes.
FSI.
I do have an economics minor. That validates me to a little bit, but my eternal shame, and actually I should maybe not even say this, but I never took a calculus class in my entire life. I never did. And now I'm in the financial technology space, if you can believe that.
There you go. So let's talk about Finovate and your marketing background. I'll figure out a way to fold your English major into this question. Right. But so maybe when we think of Finovate, we think of the podcast, we think of Julie Moon and the work that she does in research and blogging. What is the importance of content development in financial services today? And does it really apply to financial services? Should people listen? What should they be doing? What should they not be doing?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think in this moment right now, obviously, Finovate is an in-person events company first and foremost. And so, we find ourselves in the position that a lot of other people do, where we have had to really dramatically alter how we look at the ecosystem and how we're able to impact people. So, in a normal year, when we're able to do in-person events, this type of content, I think, is in this sort of nice to have category. Like, it's fun. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. In the moment that we're in right now, it's vital. It's absolutely essential. So, you mentioned Julie, you mentioned our podcast. There's also a writer named David Penn who is really useful for us as well. He does a lot of writing with Julie. So, we've always had this blog. We've always had this idea that some people prefer to receive information through the written word, and we want to make sure that we're scratching that itch. Lately, we've been looking to expand the content even further. We've looked at how what value you get from a physical event, and looked at how we can provide those same types of pieces in other areas. So we now have the podcast, which has been out for a little more than a year and is still growing in listenership, which is great, the Finovate podcast. And it's a kind of short, quick interview-based podcast for anybody who hasn't listened to it. I definitely recommend you check it out. Not just because I'm heavily biased and I'm the host, but I think it is good content. Getting into some of the interesting people and ideas that drive the fintech space. And in 2021, we're going to be doing a lot in terms of content creation on our own. We're going to be looking at how we can get more video into the ecosystem, how we can offer more touch points, ways for people to connect with each other remotely. And so, there's basically no shortage of opportunities for people to get out there, written word, listening, watching, connecting to each other, question and answer, things along these lines. And so we're going to be trying to play with all of these formats, because I think that at the end of the day, this is a moment which will reward people who take chances. And so we're trying from our standpoint to just put as many different lines in the water, start collecting some data on how people want to engage with the content that we have. And then we can start to move forward accordingly and really prioritize where people seem to be wanting to spend their time. But until that moment, we're just going to be trying a lot of different things. So, if you came to Finovate Fall Digital, you saw us play out with a new type of content called 25 and 5, which is hosted by Julie and David. 25 questions in 5 minutes with the Finovate innovators. And it's such a different piece of content for us. It's a lot more lighthearted. It's really quick hitting. If you do that math, you're talking about 5 questions a minute. So it's not going to be this style where, I've been monologuing here for probably like 3 or 4 minutes on this one answer. It's just quick, 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 quick. Some questions are serious and some questions aren't. And it's really fun. We got a really good response to that at Finovate Fall Digital. We'll be doing it again at FinovateWest Digital and probably beyond that as well. So that's a good example of the type of thing that we're looking at. Can we do things which we haven't been able to do before? We're obviously limited from being able to do some of the things which we've counted on as an organization, which again, so many other companies are in that same position that we are. But we're responding to that by trying to be creative and look at where else we can add value. We can create some things that people want to watch, want to read, want to listen to. And so I think for anybody who's trying to reevaluate their content strategies, that's what I would suggest is, go for as many different things as you can think of and just see what works, because everybody's different. There's a lot of different ways people want to be reached. And this is a moment where, while you are under some limitations, also technology enables you to reach out to people and connect with them in ways that you weren't able to before. So there are some new tools to play with as well.
And ultimately, it's the connection that really matters. And sometimes, or most times perhaps, content is the thing that nowadays introduces us to new folks, right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you could watch something, you can see who else has watched it, share your thoughts with them. It just kind of spurs conversation in a way which I think can be really productive. And I think content can be valuable in its own right. Certainly you can get good ideas from there. And in the case of the Finovate in particular, watching those demo videos and seeing how these companies present themselves and what they're able to do, I think that in particular gives a lot of really good ideas, and also just can give you, if you need X, you can find it right now. You can find companies who are working on it right now. And so that's really useful. But you're totally right. Getting connected to other people in the space is vital, and being able to reach out to them and having something to talk about, knowing that you have a shared interest, a shared passion, can be really useful as well.
That's wonderful, Greg. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great getting to know you. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave for the FSI community?
Yeah, well, I think, just keep an eye on Finovate in 2021. There's obviously a lot of moving pieces going on, but we are still planning to return to in-person events. We're kind of tentatively looking right now at September of next year, being able to do a Finovate Fall in person again. But the other piece that's really important for us is that we don't lose what we've gained over the course of this pandemic. And what I mean by that is, we've found that there are people out there who prefer to attend events digitally, who prefer to be able to avoid travel costs. As much fun as it is to fly into Manhattan for a lot of people, there are people who think it's really painful to come into JFK or LaGuardia and sit in a cab and get in there. So we're discovering that there are people who are going to prefer to stay and do remote conferences going forward. And what we'll be doing from our standpoint is to make sure that we offer both. The in-person events are something that we'll absolutely get back to, but we also think it's really vital that we continue to play with these technologies and continue to get people where they want to be, wherever they're dialing in from. So, the hybrid event is something which we're spending a lot of time thinking about right now. And it's something which you'll see more and more of in 2021 as we start to get more clarity on when we can come back to physical. You'll also see us continue to engage people digitally, continue to look for new types of content that we can create and produce. So, as they say, watch this space, because there will be some exciting pieces coming up. And just to quickly list out our next couple of events, FinovateWest here at the end of November. We'll have Finovate Europe, which has been in Berlin, which will now also be a digital event. That one will be in March. Still plenty of time to get involved with as a presenter or a sponsor or an attendee for that one, depending on where you're watching this from. And then we'll return with our US shows in San Francisco and New York probably some combination of digital and in person for both of those. So it should be really exciting to see where we get to. And the big picture is fintech innovation is more important now than it maybe ever has been. So from our standpoint, we certainly feel an obligation to the industry to continue to provide a platform where people can get their products out there, connect with each other, and find solutions that'll help us all move forward as we deal with these really troubling times.
So cool, Greg. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.